Hey everybody, and welcome to Epic Everyday, our weekday podcast for busy, stressed out Christians who want to thrive instead of just survive.
Yeah.
I'm Liz Frericks, and this is my husband, Evan.
Good morning.
And we're so glad you guys are here with us on this wonderful Friday.
Yeah. It's been a fun week, talking about forgiveness all week.
It has been. I really like this topic a lot.
Yeah, it's just really important. And unfortunately, all too often misunderstood and convoluted. Is that the word I want? With reconciliation.
Oh, confused with reconciliation? Yeah. It is convoluted, people's understanding of forgiveness in general, but yes, it is often confused with reconciliation. Since it's Friday, we're going to talk about being complete. Being complete is utilizing your entire self. So not being a fragmented person where you're someone different at home and at work and all over, but just being the same person all the time, fully engaged, and you're not stuck in the past or the future on the worry-regret spectrum, but you're present in this moment and you're dealing with what's actually happening. You're not living in an alternate reality.
Yeah. And we're going to talk about kind of two spheres of this forgiveness activity, the sphere of ourselves, and that's really us being alone with God, I think, and then the sphere of us interacting with other people.
Yes. I think it's so key what you just said, alone with God. Like, it's not just us alone going, oh my goodness, what do I need to change? Yeah. I'm so hurt. I'm so angry. How do I forgive this person? We're not spinning our wheels in our own brains. That's We're, running to the Lord. I was thinking about how forgiveness is tied in with faithfulness because, faithfulness, we talked about last week, how it's, seeing with God's eyes and then acting according to God's perspective instead of coming up with our own perspective and living that way. And I think forgiveness is the same way. It's only because we believe that God is working everything out for the good of those who love him, that he can transform bad things that happen to us and actually turn them into things that we're thankful for in the long run, even though they feel awful in the short term.
Yeah. And when we're talking about forgiving ourselves, that's often one of the hardest people to forgive. We know our heart, we know our motives, we know why we said that rude thing or hurt somebody more severely maybe than just a word, but having that real perspective of God's faithfulness and his view of us is through the cross.
Right.
There is forgiveness available there.
Yeah, having that lens of redemption just makes such a difference.
And it's also tough because it takes being honest with ourselves about our sin. Like, I don't know, I feel like I know Christians who they think they're embracing the gospel, but they're merely minimizing their sin or minimizing, I think. Yeah. And they're not very in touch with their sinfulness. We don't want to dwell on it and not...
Martin Luther.
Yeah, right.
He's like confessing 10 times a day because he's like, oh, I'm such a sinful person. He confessed so much that reportedly his confessor told him to go out and commit a real sin and then come back,
But he knew the depravity of his heart and he was broken about it.
Yeah.
And we want to at least know our heart. So that's one side of it. And then we're also going to be talking about the importance of engaging in forgiveness activities with our fellows, with our church family.
Right.
And with the people we've wronged and the people that have wronged us. This is where tools like, we still have to accept forgiveness. If someone forgives us, we can't, what kind of bitterness would that be? Where I think we do that we I hurt you so bad, and I know you said you forgive me, but let me make it up to you still, or I'm not going to let go, I don't know, whatever that might be. But
it really is miserable.
Yeah.
Kind of reminds me of, this is different, but when I first published my book, Tales from a Spacious Place, there were people in the congregation that I used to have a nice relationship with where we just talk about what's going on in our lives, But then after I published my book, the only thing that they ever said to me was like, I'm sorry, I still haven't read your book. And that was all they wanted to talk about was apologizing for that. And I was like, I don't really care if you read my book or not. Like, I just
want to be friends.
Want to be friends. Yeah. So,
because they felt like maybe you were checking off this list of like who's read it and who hasn't.
I guess I have no idea because I honestly, and I really would be fine if nobody read it. I know that's the unhealthy end of that spectrum.
Yeah.
But
it's like really, a secret public journal. There's a comedian who, one of his bits is a secret public journal. It's just him reading a journal that's funny, but because he's reading it on the radio. So anyway.
Yes.
You're like the opposite of that. That was like, here's a book, but
yes.
Working on it.
Yeah, I'm working on it. Working on being more open to marketing and things. But their inability to accept that it wasn't even forgiveness because I really didn't need them to read it. But
sure.
Their inability for me to be like I said, I don't even know how many times, that's fine. I wasn't talking to you to find out where you were at and reading my book,
Yeah.
But it still was the same conversation week after week after week until it just, like, our relationship kind of atrophied because of it,
And this really is, as with anything in a relationship, it's an ongoing process. And our forgiveness activities and our confession and things like that to God are ongoing too because we continue to sin.
Yeah.
And, I've been meditating on this verse a lot this week, and I may have already mentioned it, but 1 John 1:9, if we make it our habit to confess our sin, he is faithful to forgive and cleanse us of all unrighteousness.
That's such a great verse.
Yeah. But it's got to be a habit. It's got to be part of our daily life. It's so important.
Well, and I think sometimes, having that habit of keeping short accounts with other people feels uncomfortable because we forget that we all sin. Nobody can go through their entire lives and not apologize for something. It's just the nature of life. We all have trauma. We all make mistakes. And so when we embrace our common humanity, our common brokenness, it's a lot easier to come to somebody and say, I messed up. Mm-hmm. Instead of being like, oh no, I have to hide my mistakes because, I'm someone that I shouldn't be making mistakes.
Right. We've kind of walked that line of knowing our sin and naming it and talking about it with people, but not getting consumed by it. I don't know, but I feel like there's this other thing that I struggle with. It's like, I'm so annoyed that I keep sinning and I've had to ask for forgiveness for the same thing for a few times now. And isn't that getting old and annoying? And But if we're really engaging in forgiveness with that other person, and if they're really doing, like you brought up, where Jesus tells his disciples to forgive 70 times 7 times, if my friends are willing to do that for me, I've got to accept that because that's love and that's an amazing thing, even if I sin against them 70 times.
I think another reason why it's so key to engage in forgiveness activity with other people is to get another pair of eyes on the situation.
Yeah.
Because we don't know what we don't know. And if we believe a lie, one of those things that was caught growing up was like, you're not allowed to make any mistakes ever, period.
Yeah.
And so because of that, like, I was so afraid of making mistakes, and I would be incredibly distraught over little things because I was just like, oh no, this person's going to be so mad at me because, I accidentally broke their thing, or, I forgot to call them, or relatively minor things that were
2 minutes late.
Right. Yeah. That's the kind of thing that'll give me a panic attack. So just being able to recognize, like, have somebody else say to me, why are you getting so worked up about this? Like, most people wouldn't even be upset at all,
Yeah, and that's good. Because then at that point, it's not forgiveness anymore. It's like, this isn't an offense.
Exactly.
There's no thing here.
Right.
So you don't need to confess, and I don't need to forgive you.
Right. I actually have written in my journal that I read regularly to remind myself that if God can't forgive me, then it's not a sin. Like, if I can't go to God and go, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry that I dropped this plate and I broke it, and I'm so sorry I wasn't taking care of your stuff, or, whatever.
You could try to turn it into a sin.
I could turn it into a sin. Right. But for the most part, it's stuff that, like, is genuinely just an accident,
Yeah.
And if he's like, well, can't forgive you for that. There's nothing to forgive. Then I need to let myself off the hook too, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so then there's a good mix of, doing some self-inspection and having other people kind of showing,
right.
Like we've got to do both. We need to ask God for the right idea of what's going on. And that's the great thing about our Christian brothers and sisters. They can help us see the truth too. How great would it be if there was some sort of not really revival, but some awakening of this idea of confessing our sins to one another and not judging and extending the grace of God to our brothers and sisters.
It would be powerful.
I've got a couple friends I can do that with. I feel like you and I can do that, where it's like, I really can forgive you. And I know that because the blood of Christ has already taken care of this.
Right.
Who am I to hold it against you? But and thank you for your confession. That's an amazing thing to say and to hear. It's so fulfilling.
Yes, it is. And it, bringing those sins into the light and going through the process of confession and forgiveness is just so freeing. Maybe most people have experience with this where we don't even realize how exhausting it is carrying something and trying to keep it secret and pushing it down and pushing it down and pushing it down and pushing it down. And then when you bring it into the light and just say, okay, Lord, I admit that I did this, and you tell someone, it's so incredibly freeing. Yeah.
And I guess a caution, you kind of see that example of how incredibly freeing it can be. I've seen this in support groups where guys will come in and they've had this problem for years, and then they're like, I'm going to confess, maybe it's their wife or some significant person in their life. And then they confess, and it's a bomb to this other person, but then to the person who's been engaged in secret sin for 30 years, it's like they feel like they can fly. And so, that another argument for short accounts. So maybe some tact and maybe some good godly counsel if there is a sin that's been secret for 30 years and you're considering this. It's got to be
a year.
Sure. Yeah. It's got to be confessed, but let's start with the me and God part, and maybe me and a mentor and somebody who's walked the path before you drop that bomb on somebody. But it will come, and it can be an amazing thing to the relationship.
Again, like we talked about yesterday with reconciliation, it really takes both parties being willing to work on stuff, and there's no guarantee. And we have plenty of experience with trying to go through the reconciliation process and having the other party be like, you're insane, and completely closing the door on that. So, there's no guarantee that it's going to work out well, but it's going to work out better, if that makes sense.
If we're walking in the truth and if we're being obedient to God. If you want to know more about it, go to your Bible app or a Bible webpage and look up confession. See how much it's talked about.
Right. I think, too, the other thing to keep in mind with having other people to help you is just having a better perspective on the other person, too. Because I know sometimes when somebody is like, oh, this person did such and such to me, having been in a similar position before, I can say, well, have you thought about X, Y, Z? Like, have you thought about maybe they weren't trying to do something? I actually was thinking about in Pirates of Penzance, where the Major General and the Pirate King are trying to communicate, and the Major General says, have you ever known what it is to be an orphan? And then the Pirate King says, often, and they think that they're just each repeating each other instead of saying orphan and often. And so sometimes terms that we think are very clear when we're trying to talk to somebody else may not be as clear to them. Things that we think they did, they may not think that they did it because they have a totally different motivation behind it. So,
it takes some vulnerability and some communication.
Exactly.
This hurt my feelings because I thought this was what you were saying, and then they can say that's not what I meant. they might still need to apologize, but then can be reconciliation there. But not if we're like just keeping it to ourselves and trying to make us not be bothered by it.
It's definitely a process. Like all these all the things we talk about, it takes practice and work. And you're not going to be perfect at it right away. And it's going to take, falling down a few times and yeah.
But it's possible. It's something God gives us the ability to do. It's part of the fruit of the Holy Spirit.
All right. Well, hopefully that gives us all some stuff to think about. Hope you guys have enjoyed this week and that it has challenged you. We always pray that every week challenges you, but since forgiveness and reconciliation is such a passion of mine, I extra pray that, you guys will be able to differentiate between those two and might give you some of the same freedom that I've found.
Do some housekeeping here. Summer is really starting now. It's Memorial Day on Monday, and next week we are going to be taking the week off. We're going to rerun some shows. We'll do some encore presentations of our week on joy, which is a week we really enjoyed, and then we'll be back with new episodes on June 4th.
As always, pick whether today is going to be awesome or not, whether you're going to strengthen those neural pathways to look for good things or not. We love you guys, and we're praying for you. Thanks to everybody that's been listening to the show and sharing the show. We really appreciate it. If you have found this podcast helpful, please do continue to share it. And we'll talk to you guys later. Have an awesome weekend.
Sounds good. See ya.